I should have known something was off the moment I read the job listing. $500 per night. Babysitter needed for twin children. Rural location. 3 nights only. Strict rules must be followed. No names. No photos. Just a phone number and a zip code. I stared at the listing longer than I probably should have. Half of me thought it was a prank. The other half saw my bank account balance, $42.13, and knew I couldn't afford to ignore it. So I texted the number. 10 minutes later, I got a reply. Can you drive? An hour after that, I had a name, the Morris Estate, and a pin location deep in Louisiana, way past the last gas station, tucked somewhere between swamp and silence. The instructions were clear. Arrive before sundown, don't bring anyone with you, and read the list of rules carefully. I didn't even ask about the kids. That's how desperate I was. I packed a bag, filled up my tank with the last of my cash, and hit the road. The further I drove, the more the world felt like it was peeling away behind me. The trees grew thicker, the radio turned to static, and the sky, though still blue, began to feel heavy, as if something was pressing down from above. At some point, I stopped seeing other cars, then houses, then signs. Just trees. Just road. Just me. I almost turned back when my GPS blinked out, the map spinning in circles like it was panicking. But just as I slowed down, the road widened, and I saw it, a long gravel driveway flanked by crumbling brick columns and rusted iron gates standing wide open. The Morris Estate. The house sat far in the distance, barely visible beyond the thick trees and hanging moss. White paint peeled from its wooden frame. Columns stood crooked like tired old bones. It looked like something pulled out of a Civil War photograph, frozen, forgotten. I sat there in my car, engine idling, unsure if I should go in. Then my phone buzzed. We are waiting. Do not be late. No name. Just that. I swallowed hard and turned into the driveway. Gravel crunched beneath my tires, and the air grew still, as if even the wind held its breath. When I reached the front porch, the door creaked open before I even knocked. A woman stood in the doorway, tall and thin, dressed in a long black coat despite the summer heat. Her skin looked pale, almost gray. She didn't smile. You're Carl? I nodded. Come in. Quickly. We don't have much time. Inside, the house was colder than it should have been. The lights were dim. The hallway smelled faintly of wet earth and lavender, a strange mix that made my stomach twist. A man stepped out from a side room. He wore a matching black coat. He handed me an envelope and a folded sheet of paper. Your payment, he said, then tapped the paper. And the rules. Do not take them lightly. I opened my mouth to ask a question, but he raised a hand. We'll be gone 3 nights. You'll meet the children shortly. They stay in the nursery. You do not enter their room past midnight. You do not ask them questions about the house. Why not? I asked, half joking. He didn't laugh. He just stared at me for a long second, then turned away. His wife gave me one last look, cold, almost guilty, then followed him out the front door. And just like that, I was alone, with a list of rules, 2 silent children somewhere upstairs, and a house that felt like it hadn't been lived in for years. I unfolded the sheet of paper. The rules. Do not enter the attic. Keep all mirrors covered after sunset. Do not allow the twins to speak in unison. Never open the front door after 3:33 a.m. If you hear knocking, pretend you didn't. No visitors. Ever. Always say good night to the children before 9 p.m. There were 7 rules, all written in the same jagged handwriting. At the bottom, in red ink, someone had scribbled, "Whatever you do, don't let them trick you." My heart was racing. I laughed nervously and looked around the dim, creaking house. What the hell had I just signed up for? I'd never driven this far south before. The air started to change about an hour outside Baton Rouge. It turned thick, like soup you could breathe. My old Honda rattled down the cracked highway, the trees on either side closing in like giant arms. Spanish moss hung low, brushing against the windshield as if trying to whisper something through the glass. I had the directions written on a crumpled note. GPS stopped working about 20 miles back. No signal. No music. Just the hum of the tires and the occasional rustle from the woods. It felt like the world had emptied itself behind me. After an endless stretch of marsh and silence, I saw the sign. Elysian Grove. The wood was rotted and the paint peeled, but the name was still carved deep. The road twisted left, and suddenly I was swallowed by forest. Cypress trees stood like guards on either side, their roots twisted and gnarled in the murky water below. Every now and then, I'd see a ripple in the swamp, or catch a flash of movement just beyond the trees. Probably birds. Maybe. The house came into view without warning. It rose behind a veil of fog, tall and pale, like a skeleton of an old dream. The mansion was 2 stories, wide and tired-looking. The paint was the color of weathered bone. Thick vines crawled up the sides, gripping the wood like fingers. A porch wrapped around it, and on one side, an old swing moved back and forth slowly, though there was no wind. I parked on the gravel drive, the tires crunching louder than I expected. The front door opened before I even got out. A woman stepped out first, tall, thin, with tired eyes and lips pressed tight, like she was always expecting bad news. Her husband followed, shorter, wide shoulders, eyes that moved too fast. They looked like they hadn't slept in days. "You're Carl?" the woman asked, voice tight. I nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Come inside. We don't have much time." Inside, the air was different. Heavy. Still. The kind of stillness that makes your ears ring. The house was beautiful in that crumbling, Southern Gothic kind of way. High ceilings, tall windows, grand staircase, but everything was just slightly off. Like it had been cleaned in a hurry. Like someone wanted it to look normal. They led me to the living room. The kids were already there. Twins. A boy and a girl. 8, maybe 9. Dressed in perfect little clothes. Pale skin. Black hair neatly combed. They sat side by side on the couch, hands on their laps, staring straight ahead. "Lily and Lyle," the mother said. "These are your charges." Neither child looked at me. Not even a blink. The father handed me a folded piece of paper. "These are the rules. Read them. Follow them." He said it like he was reading off a sentence. Before I could ask a single question, they were already at the door. "Wait," I said. "Don't you want to show me around? Medical info? Allergies?" The father paused, then looked at me hard. "The rules are more important." Then they left. Just like that. The silence that followed was complete. The house didn't creak. The wind didn't blow. Even the swing outside had stopped. I looked at the paper in my hand. Old, yellowed. The ink was smudged in places. Babysitter instructions. Read immediately. 1. Do not let them speak in unison. 2. Never open the attic door. 3. Feed them at 7 o'clock sharp. Not before. Not after. 4. Do not let them near the pond. 5. If there's knocking at 3:33 a.m., do not open the door. 6. Never ask them about the mirror in the hallway. 7. Keep the lights on in the kitchen at all times. 8. If they say he is watching, do not respond. Just leave the room. 9. You must stay inside after sunset. 10. Most importantly, do not break more than 1 rule a night. I stared at the list for a long time. Then I looked up. The twins were still sitting on the couch. Still silent. Still unmoving. But now they were both smiling. And their eyes were on me. The house looked like something out of a movie, old, southern, and slowly losing a battle against time. Spanish moss draped from the trees like tired curtains. Paint peeled from the wood in long strips, and the front door creaked open before I could even knock. A tall man with a deep frown stood in the doorway. He wore a black suit that looked too stiff for the heat, and sweat glistened on his forehead. A woman stood beside him, her hands shaking as she clutched a small handbag. "You must be Carl," the man said. His voice was flat, tired. "Come in. We don't have much time." I stepped inside, the floorboards groaning beneath my feet. The air was thick with the smell of old books, wood polish, and something else, something sour and damp, like the earth after a storm. The man handed me an envelope before I could say anything. "And here are the rules," he said. "Read them. Follow them. All of them." The woman finally looked at me, her eyes full of something I couldn't place. Fear, maybe. Or guilt. "Where are the children?" I asked, my voice catching slightly in the stillness. "They're upstairs," the man said. "You'll meet them in a moment. Just try not to scare them. And don't let them scare you." Before I could ask what that meant, they were already heading out the door. The woman paused, turned around, and said quietly, "Don't ignore the list." Then they were gone, and I was alone. I opened the envelope. Inside was a yellowed piece of paper, folded several times over. The handwriting was shaky, rushed. It read, 1. Do not let them speak in unison. 2. Do not take them near the pond. 3. Never open the attic door. 4. Always check that their bedroom door is locked by 10 p.m. 5. If you hear knocking after 3:33 a.m., do not answer it. 6. Do not accept gifts from them. 7. Keep all mirrors in the house covered after sunset. There was no greeting. No signature. Just rules. I swallowed and stuffed the paper in my pocket, telling myself it was just some weird old tradition. People out in the countryside have strange habits. It didn't mean anything. I made my way up the grand staircase, my hand brushing the carved railing that felt sticky in the humidity. The hallway upstairs was dim, the wallpaper peeling, the only light coming from a cracked window at the end. I stopped outside a door with faded animal stickers on it and knocked softly. "Come in," said two voices. I froze. They hadn't shouted. They hadn't even spoken loudly. But they had said it at the exact same time, in the exact same pitch. I opened the door slowly. Inside, the twins sat side by side on an old wooden bed with a patchy quilt. A boy and a girl, maybe 8 years old, dressed in pale clothes that looked a bit too clean, too pressed. Their hair was neat. Their skin was pale. And their eyes, those eyes looked at me like they already knew everything about me. "I'm Carl," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "We know," they said together. I cleared my throat. "Your parents said they'll be back in 3 days. Until then, I'm here to watch over you." "We know," they repeated. The girl, Lily, turned her head to the side and smiled. It was a strange smile, polite but empty. The boy, Lyle, just stared. "Do you like games?" I asked, stepping into the room. They nodded, slowly, at the same time. I didn't know what else to say, so I glanced around the room. The walls were covered in hand-drawn pictures, mostly trees, some animals, and a few dark shapes I couldn't quite make out. There were no toys. No books. Just a small mirror on the dresser and a thick, locked chest at the foot of the bed. I walked over to the window and peeked out. From there, I could see the swamp stretching out beyond the backyard. The water was still like glass. And in the distance, I saw a dark shape standing just beyond the trees. When I turned back, the twins were no longer on the bed. They stood right behind me. "Do you want to see the pond?" Lily asked. "No," I said quickly, remembering the rule. They tilted their heads at the same angle, like dolls, and smiled. "You're learning," Lyle said. I spent the rest of the day trying to act normal. I made them sandwiches, which they barely touched. We watched cartoons, but they didn't laugh or even blink. When I suggested they go play outside, they said, "He doesn't like the grass." I asked who he was, but they just went quiet. At 10 sharp, I made sure their bedroom door was locked, just like the rule said. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening. They were humming something. A lullaby, maybe. Off-key and slow. I backed away, heart thudding. That night, I dreamed of knocking. And something whispering just outside my door, calling my name. The house was too quiet. I sat on the edge of the velvet couch in the main room, staring at the fireplace even though no fire burned. The walls groaned like old bones settling, and the grandfather clock in the corner ticked louder than it should have. I glanced at the time. Almost 11 p.m. The twins had gone to bed without much fuss. They didn't complain, didn't ask for water, didn't even smile. They just walked into their room like little machines, crawled into their beds, and pulled the blankets up to their chins. I watched them for a moment before turning off the light. But the list stayed with me. I had folded it neatly and stuffed it into my hoodie pocket, but I kept pulling it out, reading it again and again. Rule number 3, do not let them speak in unison. If they do, plug your ears. I still didn't know what that was supposed to mean. What could possibly happen if 2 kids said something at the same time? I chuckled, but it was the nervous kind, the kind that only comes when you're not really sure if you're laughing or preparing to scream. I walked upstairs one last time to check on them, before going to bed myself. Their door was closed. I paused, hand on the knob, listening. Nothing. I slowly turned the knob and peeked inside. Empty. The beds were made, untouched. The window was cracked open, but the screen was still in place. My chest tightened. I called out softly. "Lily? Lyle?" No answer. My voice was louder this time. "Hey, where are you?" Still nothing. I moved quickly down the hallway, checking the other rooms. Guest room. Empty. Bathroom. Empty. Closet. Empty. That's when I saw the faint light coming from the end of the hallway. A soft, flickering glow. The door to the study was open just a sliver. I hadn't even touched that room all evening. I crept toward it. The old wood floor moaned under each step. The light flickered more as I neared the door, like candlelight. I pushed it open, and there they were. Lily and Lyle, standing side by side, completely still, facing a tall, cracked mirror hanging on the wall. A single candle burned on the desk behind them. Its flame cast long shadows that twisted like snakes. They didn't blink. They didn't move. They just stared into the mirror like they were waiting for something to appear. "Hey," I whispered. What are you doing? You're supposed to be in bed. They didn't turn. Then they said it. Together. He watches us now. Their voices matched perfectly. Same tone. Same rhythm. It didn't sound like two kids talking. It sounded like one voice in two mouths. For a second, I stood frozen. My mind was telling me to move, to say something, to do something. But my legs were heavy, like I'd stepped into thick swamp water. Then crack. The mirror splintered right down the middle. Not from anything hitting it. It just broke like something inside it had pressed too hard from the other side. The candle went out. Silence swallowed the room. I grabbed the twins by their shoulders and turned them around. Their eyes were wide and glassy, but they didn't seem scared. If anything, they looked calm. Like breaking a mirror with their voices was just another part of their night routine. I led them back to their room without saying much. I tucked them in again. This time, they didn't say a word. I shut their door and backed away slowly. In my own room, I locked the door behind me. I didn't know why. Something inside me just screamed to do it. I lay in bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. Every few minutes I'd glance at the clock. 1:03 a.m. 1:48 a.m. 2:56 a.m. Then, at 3:33 a.m., it started. Knocking. Not banging. Not pounding. Knocking. Soft. Rhythmic. Precise. 3 knocks. A pause. Then again. It was coming from downstairs. Or maybe the hallway. Or the walls. I couldn't tell. It sounded close and far all at once. I covered my ears and shut my eyes tight. The knocking didn't stop. That was the moment I remembered the final part of the third rule. If they speak in unison, plug your ears immediately. But I hadn't. I had listened. And now something was listening to me. The next morning, I stepped outside just after sunrise, hoping the fresh air would clear the fog in my head. The sky was a dull gray, the kind that made you feel like time had stopped. The swampy land around the house was silent, no birds, no insects, not even the croak of a frog. Just stillness. Too much stillness. I was about to head back inside when I saw him. He was standing near the old garden fence, half hidden behind the overgrowth. A tall man in a faded brown coat, with a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. He didn't move, didn't wave, just watched. At first, I thought he was a hunter or maybe some lost neighbor. But when I called out to him, he stepped forward with quiet, deliberate steps, like his boots didn't crunch a single leaf. "You must be Carl," he said, his voice dry and heavy, like it had been buried underground for years. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, and you are?" "Carlos," he replied. "I tend to the land. Groundskeeper." His skin was leathery and pale, stretched tight over high cheekbones. His eyes were a strange shade of green. Not bright, not natural, just off, like swamp water that doesn't reflect the sky. "I didn't know there was a groundskeeper here," I said. Carlos gave a small smile, but it didn't touch his eyes. "They don't talk much about me anymore. Still, I keep watch." I noticed something odd about the way he stood, his shoulders stiff, as if holding up invisible weight. And his boots were soaked to the ankle, like he'd been walking through the swamp all night. "You watch the house?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "I watch what lives beneath it," he replied. That made my skin crawl a little. Carlos turned his gaze toward the house. "You've seen it, haven't you? The cracks, the whispers, the changes, the rules, they're not just for show." I took a step back. "How do you know about the rules?" "I've been here longer than you think," he said. "I've seen what happens when the rules are broken." I thought about the mirror cracking last night, the twins whispering in unison, the knocking. My throat felt dry. "I didn't mean to break anything," I said quietly. "No one ever does," he murmured. "That's how it starts." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. He handed it to me. My fingers hesitated before unwrapping it. Inside was a rusted key, twisted, old, and cold even in my warm hand. "For the cellar," he said. "You'll need it." "Not yet. But soon." I looked down at the key, then back at him. "Why me?" I asked. "Why not just tell the parents? Why not take care of this yourself?" Carlos didn't answer right away. He tilted his head like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. "Because the house chose you," he said finally. "And once the house chooses, there's no turning back." With that, he turned and walked away, his figure disappearing behind the hanging moss and tall weeds without a sound. I stood there, holding the key in my hand, my heart pounding louder than I liked to admit. The house chose me? I didn't want to believe him. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The rules weren't just strange, they were sacred. and I had already broken more than one. As I turned to go back inside, I caught sight of the twins staring at me from the upstairs window. Still, silent, watching, and for the first time, I realized I wasn't babysitting them. I was babysitting whatever was inside them. And whatever it wasn't asleep anymore. Not completely. I woke up to the sound of scribbling. Not the kind you hear from a child drawing cartoons. This was fast. Frantic. Like a desperate message being scratched onto paper before the chance slipped away. I rubbed my eyes, still groggy, and checked the time. 5:17 a.m. The hallway outside my room was quiet. Too quiet. I tiptoed down the creaky staircase, following the sound into the dining room. There they were, Lily and Lyle, sitting side by side at the long oak table, their pale faces barely touched by the morning light seeping through the broken blinds. They didn't look up when I entered, just kept scribbling. I walked closer, and my heart dropped. They weren't drawing stick figures or coloring shapes. They were sketching what looked like scenes, dark ones. One page showed a shadowy figure watching from behind a tree. Another had a burning house, flames licking up the sides. But the third made my skin crawl. It was me. Or at least, it looked like me. Same messy hair. Same hoodie I was wearing. But in the drawing, I was standing in front of the attic door, blood dripping from my eyes, a jagged mouth sketched across my neck like it had been carved open. The twins had written something below it in shaky letters. "He sees you now." I took the paper from the table. "Where did you learn to draw this?" Lily looked up first. Her voice was soft. "We didn't learn it." Lyle spoke next. "We saw it." "Saw it? Where?" They both turned to look at the hallway mirror. "The cracked one. In there." A chill rolled down my spine. I sat down slowly. "Look, if this is some kind of game, I need you to stop." "Okay. I'm just here to make sure you're safe." They looked at each other. Then Lily leaned in and whispered, "You're not here to protect us, Carl." Lyle added, "You're here because you were chosen." "Chosen?" I laughed nervously. "By who?" They answered together. "The man in the pond." Silence. I stood up, forcing myself to keep a calm face. "All right. I think it's time for breakfast." But Lyle looked at me with a stare too cold for an 8-year-old. "He already knows what you're planning." Lily added, "He knew before you even came." I backed away from the table, unsure what I was more afraid of, what they were saying, or the way they said it. No hesitation. No doubt. Just certainty. Their heads turned in perfect unison as I walked back toward the kitchen. As I reached the doorway, I heard them begin to hum a low, tuneless melody. Then, again in unison, they said something that stopped me cold. "The attic door creaked open last night." I turned around. I never told them about that. Never mentioned it. But it had. At exactly 3:33 a.m., I had heard the slow, aching sound of the attic door opening on its own. I hadn't gone up. I thought it was the wind. Now I wasn't so sure. I stared at the twins. They were still sitting calmly, drawing again, this time a large, black eye in the center of the page. Watching. Always watching. I didn't say another word. I just walked back to the kitchen, grabbed a cup of cold coffee, and tried to stop my hands from shaking. Something was terribly wrong with this house. And the twins weren't just part of it. They were the key. I should have known better, but curiosity pulled me in like a magnet. I had already been walking on eggshells, trying my best to keep the rules intact, but something about the attic, the way it seemed to call me, to whisper to me, became unbearable. I tried to ignore it, I really did. But when the twins started acting weirder, speaking in riddles, drawing symbols I couldn't make sense of, the pull was stronger than ever. I knew the list of rules inside out by now, like a prayer I recited in my sleep. Rule 1, never enter the attic. But there it was, the trapdoor at the end of the hall, old wood creaking as if it was begging me to open it. Maybe I had convinced myself that the list was just some overprotective nonsense. Maybe I thought I could figure out the truth myself. Either way, my feet moved before I could even think to stop them. I grabbed the old iron handle, twisting it with a squeak, and the door groaned open. A rush of stale, damp air hit me in the face as I stepped into the darkness of the attic. The smell was like wet wood and something else, a deeper, earthier scent, like the swamp had crept inside the house itself. I switched on the light, but the bulb flickered, casting long, shaky shadows across the room. The attic was filled with boxes, old furniture covered in white sheets, dusty trunks stacked in corners, and piles of forgotten things. But it wasn't just the ordinary junk you'd expect from an old house. There was something off about the place, like it was frozen in time. I wandered deeper, my shoes crunching on the wooden floor, my breath feeling heavier with each step. I noticed old framed photographs leaning against the walls, their edges yellowed with age. Some had names scrawled on the backs, babysitters, I guessed. But the faces, they looked so strange. They were all scratched out, some of them so violently defaced that you could barely make out the eyes. I stopped and picked one up, turning it over. The back read, Amanda, 1993. But her face, her eyes, there was something wrong with them. They weren't the vacant, blank eyes of a person just staring at the camera. No, these were wide open, as if she had seen something too horrible to describe. I couldn't shake the feeling that she had seen me. A sudden cold draft swept through the room, making me shiver. I glanced around, feeling that unease grow. My eyes landed on a dusty old cassette player sitting on top of a pile of old books. A thick layer of dust covered it, but there was one tape inserted. I leaned closer, squinting at the faded label. Brianna, 2001. My heart skipped. Brianna. Another babysitter. What had happened to her? What had happened to all of them? I couldn't help it. I pressed play. At first, it was just static, that low crackling sound like the speaker was dying. But then a voice emerged, faint but clear. A woman's voice. Don't listen to the twins. Don't break the rules. He's coming. He's always been here. I froze. The words echoed in my ears, each one a warning that felt too familiar. Don't break the rules. Suddenly, the tape clicked off with a jarring, static-filled screech. I snapped the cassette out of the player and stared at it. Was this what had happened to all of them? Every last babysitter? Did they break the rules too? I looked back at the wall of photographs and felt my pulse quicken. Each face I saw had been erased, no smiles, no moments captured in time. Just blank, scratched-out eyes. A thought gripped me, cold and terrifying. What if they were trying to warn me? I turned away from the wall, heart racing, desperate to leave the attic before I heard something worse. But then my gaze landed on a map. It was pinned up on the wall, next to the window, like a forgotten relic. I squinted at the faint lines drawn in red, the small handwritten notes along the edges. The Watcher's Path was scrawled at the top. I stepped closer, feeling a sick sense of dread crawl up my spine. The map was of the swamp, the same swamp surrounding the estate. The lines on the map seemed to guide me, leading deep into the heart of the bayou. And right in the center was a symbol, one I recognized. It was the same symbol the twins had been drawing, over and over again, on scraps of paper. The map wasn't just a path through the swamp. It was a path to something else. Something that couldn't be explained. I backed away, my head swimming with confusion. This couldn't be real. It didn't make sense. But then I heard it. A soft, distant whisper. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me, but the voice, those words, were unmistakable. Don't break the rules. I turned, feeling my stomach drop. It wasn't the tape. It wasn't the wind. It was the twins. They were standing at the entrance to the attic, just watching me. Lily and Lyle. Their eyes were dark, their faces pale, and they spoke in perfect unison. You shouldn't have come up here. I couldn't move. The air around me felt thick with tension, heavy and suffocating. The house seemed to hold its breath. I knew then that I had made a mistake. The rules weren't just there to protect me. They were there to keep something else at bay. Something that now knew I had broken them. And I had no idea what the consequences would be. He's coming. Their voices echoed, and for the first time since I'd stepped foot in this cursed house, I truly understood what I had done. I had just unleashed something I couldn't control. The house felt heavier that morning, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. The sun barely made it through the thick mist that clung to the bayou, casting everything in a pale, sickly light. I'd barely had time to finish my breakfast when I saw him, Carlos, standing by the oak tree near the edge of the yard watching me. I froze. There was something unnerving about his stillness, as if he had been waiting there for hours, unseen. His long coat flapped lazily in the breeze, but he didn't move an inch. I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew something I didn't. I hesitated, but the curiosity was too much to ignore. I grabbed my jacket, stepped out onto the porch, and made my way toward him. "Morning, Carlos," I called out, trying to sound casual. My voice felt thin, like it was fighting against the weight of the silence surrounding us. He didn't reply right away. His eyes, those dark, unblinking eyes, stayed on me as I approached. I noticed a faint, almost imperceptible grin forming at the corners of his lips. "You've broken the rules," he said, his voice soft but commanding. It wasn't a question. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "I'm just doing my job. The twins are odd, but it's nothing I can't handle." His expression didn't change. The rules are there for a reason, Carl. You can't just ignore them. I frowned. They seem kind of extreme, don't you think? Carlos tilted his head slightly, as if he was weighing my words, then shook his head. You don't understand. The house, this place, it's not like other houses. There's a reason it's been empty for so long. There's a reason the twins are here. He took a step closer, his voice dropping lower, almost a whisper. It's not them you should be worried about. It's what's inside them. A chill ran down my spine. I stopped walking, standing a few feet away from him. What do you mean? What's inside them? Carlos's lips pressed into a thin line, his gaze momentarily shifting toward the house. You're playing a dangerous game, Carl. You think this is just a job, just babysitting. But it's not. You've broken the most important rule already. He paused, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Never let them speak in unison. I felt my heart skip a beat. The twins. That was the thing I had brushed off, thinking it was just some weird game they played. But the way Carlos said it, like it meant something far worse than I'd realized, stopped me cold. They're not normal, Carl, he continued, his voice steady but laced with something darker. What you're dealing with is something older. Something that's been bound here for centuries. The house is more than just a house. It's a prison. And the twins, they're the key. I swallowed, trying to process what he was saying. Prison? You're telling me this whole place is some kind of, what? Haunted? Carlos shook his head slowly. Not haunted. Contained. He took another step closer, his voice dropping even lower. The Watcher is what's inside them. And every time you break a rule, every time you ignore what you've been told, you open the door a little wider. Soon it'll be free. I stepped back, the weight of his words pressing on me. Who is this Watcher? What the hell does he want with 2 kids? Carlos's eyes darkened, his tone more urgent now. He doesn't want them. He wants you. He feeds on fear, Carl. And the twins, he paused, glancing at the house again. The twins are the conduit, the doorway. They were born for this. I stared at him, my mind racing. Everything about this place, about the twins, it suddenly felt so much bigger than I had imagined. And you? What are you, Carlos? Some kind of guardian? His lips twisted into something that almost looked like a smile, but it wasn't kind. You could say that, but my time is almost up. He looked away briefly, as if lost in thought. Then, as if deciding something, he turned back to me. I've failed before. I've seen what happens when the Watcher is freed. The others, they didn't make it. No one does. My breath caught in my throat. Then why are you still here? Why not leave? Carlos gave a bitter laugh. Because I can't. I made my choice a long time ago. And now it's your turn. I didn't know what to say. The weight of his words settled like a stone in my chest. Part of me wanted to run, to leave this place behind, but something kept me rooted to the spot. Carlos took a step back, his expression hardening. I'm telling you this, Carl, because you need to understand what's at stake. Don't break any more rules. Don't open that door any wider. His gaze shifted to the house once more, then back to me. If you do, you'll never get out. None of us ever do. I watched him turn and walk back toward the edge of the property, his figure disappearing into the mist. My thoughts were tangled, each one more confused and afraid than the last. I wanted to run, but something kept me there, staring at the mansion with its crooked windows and dark secrets. Carlos's warning echoed in my mind. The Watcher. And I had already made the first mistake. I turned back toward the house, my heart pounding. It was getting harder to ignore the feeling that something was watching me. Something that knew I was far past the point of no return. And the worst part, I had a feeling Carlos was right. I had already broken the first rule. And it was too late to go back. I didn't know what woke me. Maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was the feeling of something being wrong. I tossed in bed, eyes flicking open to the dark room, the kind of darkness that feels alive, heavy like it's pressing in on you. The clock blinked 3:12 a.m. I sighed, rubbing my eyes. I hadn't heard anything from the twins since I tucked them in. They'd been unusually quiet that night, but I chalked it up to exhaustion. The house was quiet too, quieter than usual, and the stillness unnerved me. I rolled over, trying to shake the unease. I needed sleep. But then I heard it, soft, barely audible at first, a whisper of a sound. It was coming from downstairs. I hesitated, listening harder. There was no mistaking it. The twins were calling my name. It was a strange, sing-song version of my name. No urgency, just there like an echo. A cold shiver ran down my spine, but I convinced myself it was nothing. I grabbed my phone. No signal. Of course. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid. The twins probably woke up for some reason. Maybe they were thirsty. I threw off the covers and slid out of bed. My feet met the old wooden floor with a soft thud. The house groaned, the wind outside howling through the cracks in the walls. I walked down the dark hallway, the sound of my own footsteps too loud. As I neared the stairs, I noticed the front door was slightly ajar. That's odd, I thought. I definitely hadn't left it open. I didn't even remember hearing it open. I slowly walked toward the door, a creeping sense of dread pooling in my stomach. Just as I reached for the knob, the whispering grew louder, like a chant, a low hum that didn't sound quite human. My pulse quickened. The air felt colder, heavier. My breath fogged in front of me, despite the humidity outside. I looked down the long hallway, past the staircase, into the faint light spilling from the kitchen. There, in the shadows, I saw them, Lily and Lyle, standing perfectly still, side by side, facing the open door. I froze, my heart pounding. "Carl," they said, their voices like soft echoes. Their faces were pale, almost ghostly, their eyes wide and vacant. It was as if they were staring straight through me. "Lily, Lyle," I whispered, my voice faltering. They didn't respond. Their gaze was locked on the door, as if waiting for something or someone. I was about to call out to them when I noticed something else. Behind them, the door creaked open wider. The fog outside seemed to swirl toward the house, gathering in the doorway like it was being sucked in. It didn't make sense. I wasn't imagining it. It was happening. "Carl," the twins spoke again, their voices more urgent this time, but still synchronized, like two parts of one being. They took a step forward, their feet moving in perfect unison, as if they weren't walking at all, but gliding. I took a breath, trying to steady myself. "What are you doing?" "Come back inside." But the words felt hollow, like they didn't matter. They reached the door, but instead of going outside, they turned to face me. There was no fear in their eyes. No sign of innocence. Only emptiness. And then they began to chant. In perfect unison, their voices blending into something strange, almost inhuman. It was like they were speaking a language that wasn't meant for human ears. I stepped back, my legs feeling heavy. A knot of panic twisted in my chest. "What's happening?" I whispered, though I didn't expect an answer. The fog outside thickened, swirling faster, and something massive, moved beneath it. The twins continued to chant, their voices rising in pitch until I thought my ears would bleed. It was a pattern, a rhythm, a call to something beyond this world. I should have pulled them inside. I should have screamed. But I stood frozen, paralyzed by the horror of it. There was something else out there, something waiting for the twins to finish their chant. The fog at the door swirled and shifted, and I saw a figure emerge from it. It was tall, dark, and towering, its form indistinct, like a shadow trying to take shape. My breath caught in my throat. The twins stopped chanting. For the first time since I'd met them, they smiled. But it wasn't a smile I recognized. It was something predatory. It was as if they knew exactly what was happening, and they wanted it. I took a step forward, my voice a choked whisper. "No, please." But the twins didn't respond. They raised their hands, their fingers pointing toward the fog, and that's when I saw it, the Watcher. It was more than just a shadow. It had weight, substance, a presence that twisted the air around it. The air seemed to vibrate with its power. Its eyes, if it even had eyes, burned with an ancient, soulless hunger. It reached out, not with arms, but with tendrils of darkness, stretching toward the twins. And they let it. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The Watcher's presence wrapped around my chest, squeezing tight. Every instinct told me to run, but my body wouldn't obey. My legs felt like lead. The Watcher spoke, its voice not like a sound, but a feeling. "The end is near. You were never meant to interfere." The twins' voices filled my ears again, their chant rising as they stepped closer to the fog, closer to the Watcher. They weren't children anymore. They were vessels, and I was the fool who had let them in. I stumbled backward, trying to tear my eyes away from the terrible scene unfolding in front of me. The fog swallowed the twins, their faces fading into the darkness. The last thing I saw was the Watcher's eyes. The last thing I heard was the twins' laughter, a sound that seemed to echo from every corner of the house. And then, everything went silent. The fog disappeared. The Watcher was gone. I was alone. And the house was still. The twins were gone. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the empty doorway, the silence suffocating me. But eventually, I turned and ran back into the house, slamming the door behind me. I didn't know what happened. I didn't know if I was still dreaming, or if I had finally lost my mind. but I couldn't shake the feeling that something far worse was coming. And I had a feeling I was next. The knocking starts again. I can feel the chill crawling up my spine before I even register the sound. It's faint at first, like a distant tap on wood, but as it grows louder, the feeling of dread thickens in the air. I look at the clock, 3:33 a.m. It's the same time as last night. Last night, I ignored it. This time, I don't know if I can. The house feels different tonight. It's no longer just quiet, it's waiting. The air hangs heavy with something I can't explain. It presses down on me, making it harder to breathe, harder to think. I sit up in bed, heart pounding. The twins' room is just down the hall, but the knock, it sounds as though it's coming from the very walls themselves. Slowly, I swing my legs over the side of the bed and stand, the floor creaking beneath my weight. My fingers tremble as I reach for the door handle. My mind races with 1,000 thoughts, but one keeps repeating itself, "Don't open the door. Don't open the door." I swallow hard, but my feet move on their own. Before I can stop myself, I'm standing in front of the door, my hand on the knob, my mind split in two, one side screaming at me to run, the other pushing me forward. I don't know what I expect to see on the other side, but something tells me I won't like it. The knocking continues, rhythmic, unrelenting. It's almost familiar now, like it's been happening for years, decades even. Like it's been happening before, and will happen long after I'm gone. I open the door. The hallway is empty. The air is so thick it feels like I'm walking through fog. The lights flicker, casting long shadows across the walls. The silence afterward is suffocating. I stand there for a moment, eyes scanning every corner, waiting for something to move. The faintest rustle, the smallest shift. But there's nothing. I should have known. It was never going to be that easy. I step out into the hallway, closing the door behind me, my breath shallow. The twins' room is just a few steps away, and I can hear soft murmurs now, like whispers slipping out from under the door. But these aren't their voices. Not exactly. My heart pounds louder. It's the same rhythm as the knocking. Thud, thud, thud. The whispers grow louder, clearer. They're not even in the room anymore. They're in my head. Come closer. It's not the twins. It's something else. My feet move again, guided by something I can't explain. The whispers pull me down the hallway, toward the stairs. The walls seem to close in on me as I walk, and I swear I feel them breathing, exhaling with each step I take. I make it halfway down the stairs before the floorboards creak. I freeze. The whisper stops. Turn around. I don't turn around. I can't. But I want to. I want to see what's behind me. I want to understand why everything feels so wrong. But I don't. I keep walking, my hands slick with sweat, my pulse racing as I reach the bottom of the stairs. The knocking has stopped, but now the house is alive in a way I can't explain. The air is thick, oppressive, and the sound of breathing, deep, low breathing, fills my ears. It's coming from the walls, from the floor, from everywhere. The twins' room. I reach the door, and the whispering is almost deafening now. I can feel it in my chest, the vibrations of it, as if the walls themselves are alive. I stand in front of the door, hands trembling. I should knock. I should check on them. But something tells me I shouldn't. Something tells me they're not in there anymore. I don't knock. Instead, I open the door. The room is empty. At least, I think it's empty at first. But then my eyes land on the window. The curtains are drawn, but there's movement behind them, slow, deliberate. The shape of something long and thin. It's as if something is waiting for me to make the next move. Something that isn't quite human. What is that? I take a step closer, heart hammering, every instinct in me screaming to turn back, to run, to leave this house and never look back. But I can't. I've already gone too far. I have to know. With one shaky hand, I pull back the curtains. Nothing. For a moment, I just stand there, blinking in confusion, but then the room shifts. The walls pulse. The floor groans beneath me. It's as if the house is breathing, alive with something ancient. The air grows thick with heat, and I feel the weight of it pressing down on me. I stagger back, gasping for breath, my chest tight with fear. That's when I hear it. Footsteps. Heavy. Slow. Coming from above. I don't look up. I know what it means. I don't want to know what it means. The air becomes suffocating, the weight of it unbearable. I can't breathe, can't think, can't move. I try to shout, but the sound doesn't come out. The knocking starts again. Louder this time. Closer. And then, I hear the twins' voices. But they're not speaking. They're chanting. Come. Join us. It's time. I don't know how long I stand there, paralyzed, But when I finally force myself to look up, the house is different. The walls have changed. The shadows are deeper, darker, stretching out like fingers reaching for me. And then I see it. A figure standing at the end of the hallway. Tall, cloaked in black, its face hidden beneath a hood. It's not human. Not anymore. It's the Watcher. And it's waiting for me. I should have listened to Carlos. I should have turned around and walked out the moment I stepped through the front door. But that's not how it works, is it? You don't know the danger until it's too late, and by then, it's already too late to escape. I found myself in the attic again. The walls were crooked, as if the house itself was trying to lean in on me. The air was thick, damp, and stagnant, like it hadn't moved in years. I couldn't stop myself from going up there. Something inside me just pulled me. The attic was like a living thing. It was dark, but not completely. The shadows seemed to breathe, and the dim light that filtered through the dirty windows barely made a dent in the blackness that surrounded me. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, as if they were complaining about my presence. That's when I heard the voice. At first, I thought it was Carlos. But it wasn't his voice, it was different. Layered. Multiple voices, all speaking at once. Some were high-pitched, others low and rumbling like thunder in the distance. The words were garbled, but I could make out a few. You shouldn't have come. I froze. My heart skipped a beat, and every nerve in my body went cold. The voice came from behind a pile of old furniture, faded chairs, a broken dresser, and a tall, rotting bookshelf. There was something in the air, an energy that made my skin crawl. A pressure like I was drowning in thick water. I stepped closer to the pile of junk, my breath shallow and fast. Every instinct in me screamed to turn around, but I couldn't. Not now. I had to know what was in there. I moved a heavy chair aside with trembling hands, and that's when I saw him. Carlos wasn't standing in front of me like he normally would. He was sitting. But it wasn't him, not really. His face was pale, but it wasn't his eyes that caught me. It was the way his skin seemed to flicker. Like it wasn't his at all. It rippled. His lips curled into something close to a grin, but there was no joy in it, only a terrible emptiness. You shouldn't have broken the rules, he whispered, but it wasn't just his voice. It was the voices of the past babysitters, the ones who had come before me. They were there too. In him. I could hear their fear, their regret, their pleading. And then he smiled. Not a human smile. It stretched too wide, too unnatural, like it was pulling something from deep inside him. We are the Watcher now, Carlos said. And when he spoke, it was as though the words were being fed into him by something else, something far older, far darker. His eyes, those familiar, dark eyes, were not his anymore. They were empty. Hollow. I took a step back. My legs wobbled, my mind screamed to get out, but I couldn't move. His words echoed in my head, bouncing off the walls. It was always supposed to be like this, he said, his voice becoming thicker, deeper. The twins, the rules, the house, it's all part of the cycle. We have to do this. We have to bring him back. The Watcher. The name was like ice water pouring down my spine. It clicked then, the reason the twins acted so strange, the reason the house felt like it was watching me. The Watcher wasn't a myth. He was real. And Carlos wasn't just some groundskeeper. He had been waiting. He'd been preparing. He wasn't human anymore. He had become the Watcher. I felt a pressure on my chest, like the house itself was closing in around me. The air was suffocating, thick with something I couldn't explain. It was as if the house was alive. It was breathing, alive in a way no building should be. You can't escape now, Carl, Carlos murmured, his voice low and rumbling like the sound of an earthquake far beneath the surface. His lips parted wider, impossibly wide, stretching until they cracked. You're already part of it. The house, it's already inside you. My mind reeled. Was he saying that I had somehow become part of the Watcher? That it was already too late for me? That I had become another piece of the puzzle? I took a shaky breath, finally managing to force my feet to move. I didn't know how, but I turned and ran. My legs were heavy like they were made of stone, but I pushed forward, stumbling toward the door. The knocking came again, louder this time. I could hear it, distant at first, then closer, until the sound of it was right behind me. I threw open the attic door, the sound of it scraping against the wood cutting through the silence like a scream. But when I stepped into the hallway, it wasn't the same. The walls twisted, the shadows stretching in impossible ways, as if the house itself had shifted. The air felt even thicker now, suffocating. The floorboards beneath my feet seemed to groan with every step I took. Something was following me. I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. The hallway stretched on forever. The rooms bled into one another. Time didn't seem to exist anymore. Everything around me was bending, warping, becoming something else. I didn't know if I would make it out. But I had to. I hadn't realized it before, but the house was breathing. It was hard to explain. You could feel it in your chest, like a low hum vibrating through the walls. The sound was muffled at first, but now it was unmistakable, the pulse of something ancient, something far older than the house itself. It was as if the estate was alive, hungry, even waiting. And I had spent days ignoring it, pretending I could walk its halls without consequence. But now the truth was impossible to ignore. I stood in the attic, sweat sticking to my back as I tried to catch my breath. Carlos was in front of me, no longer the human groundskeeper I thought he was. His face had become something else, something wrong. The skin seemed to sag, stretched across his skull, pale as marble, his eyes too wide, too knowing. His mouth opened, but the voice that came out wasn't just his. It was a chorus, a cacophony of whispers that all blurred together into one chilling sound. "You should never have opened the door," the voice echoed. It was an awful sound, hollow, empty, like it was coming from somewhere far away, but somehow inside my skull at the same time. I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at Carlos, or whatever he had become. My heart pounded in my chest, a drumbeat so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts over it. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but my mouth felt glued shut. Carlos smiled, or at least I think he did. It was hard to tell with the skin stretched so tight over his bones. "You've broken the rules," he said, his voice dipping into a low, almost affectionate tone. "Do you think you can undo what has already been set in motion?" My hands trembled as I clutched the piece of paper in my hand. The list. The damn list. The rules were etched in my mind by now, each one more absurd than the last, yet I had followed them. I thought I understood. I thought I was safe. But I wasn't. I looked down at the list. The final rule. The one that had been folded under all the others, hidden from my sight until now. It was simple. Too simple. Final rule. If you read this, it's already too late. I stared at those words for what felt like hours. My fingers itched to tear it, to burn it, to make it disappear. But even then I knew this was never meant to be an escape. Not for me. Not for anyone. Carlos seemed to read my thoughts, his cracked smile widening. "Now you understand." His voice, the multiple voices, overlapped, layering on top of each other in a way that made my stomach churn. I could feel the pressure building in the room. The air grew thicker, colder. I could taste the fear now, a sharp metallic tang on my tongue, the way it clung to everything. The house was pulling at me, at my mind, trying to draw me in like an endless pit. It wanted to swallow me whole. And Carlos, or whatever he was now, was offering me a choice. Leave now, forget everything. Walk away. Let the house sleep. His voice slid through the room like oil, slick and smooth. But then it turned darker, almost pleading. Or stay. Stay with me. Bind yourself to this place. Protect it from those who come after. The others. The ones who will break the rules like you did. I could feel the weight of those words. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs. The choice was clear. Stay and protect the house. Become one of its twisted guardians, or leave and forget everything. But what would I be if I left? What kind of person walks away from something this monstrous? No, there was no escaping it now. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But when I looked at the twins, Lily and Lyle, they were standing by the door. Silent. Watching. As if they were waiting for me to make the right choice. But I knew better now. There was no right choice. Only choices. Ones that led to an end, no matter what path I took. Carlos's eyes gleamed as he stepped toward me, his figure bending, shifting in the dim light. The walls groaned, the floorboards creaked under his weight. "You'll understand in time." He said it like a promise, but his voice was empty. "This is the beginning of the Watcher's return." I didn't want to be a part of that. I didn't want to be a piece of this place anymore. But the more I looked at Carlos, at the house, at the twisted twins, at everything, the more I understood. It didn't matter what I wanted. The house wasn't just alive, it was a prison. And now, it was time for me to choose whether I would be a prisoner in it, or its keeper. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders like a shroud. My fingers clenched the list in my hand, trembling, but I didn't tear it. I couldn't. Instead, I turned and walked toward the attic door. I had no idea what was waiting for me outside, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let it keep me any longer. The house could have the others, it wouldn't have me. But when I opened that door, all I heard was the soft sound of the knocking. 3:33 a.m. It was already too late. I ran, my legs burning with every step, my breath sharp and ragged in the thick, damp air. The swamp was a maze of shadows, twisted branches reaching out like gnarled fingers, clawing at my skin. The twins were ahead of me, Lily and Lyle, silent, unnervingly still. They weren't running like they should have been, but walking slowly, almost as if they knew something I didn't. Their faces were pale, ghostly, lit only by the faint, flickering glow from the house behind us. The mansion was no longer the mansion I had seen when I first arrived. The windows had changed, now dark, empty eyes watching us. The walls seemed to pulse, breathing like the heartbeat of something ancient, something alive. It had changed since I had opened the door to the knocking. The house was waking up, and with it, something far worse. I glanced behind me, the sounds of the fire raging in the distance, twisting like a snake through the trees. It wasn't normal fire. It wasn't fire at all. It was black, oily smoke, swirling like something made of shadows. The flames didn't dance, they writhed, crawling along the ground, licking at the air, feeding on nothing but the fear it created. The mansion itself seemed to groan, the structure bending as though the house was breathing, expanding, and contracting with every breath. I felt it. The ground under my feet wasn't solid anymore. The earth was soft, the water from the swamp creeping higher with every step. It was like the very land was shifting beneath me, pulling me down. My boots sank into the muck, slowing me, but I couldn't stop. I had to get out. I had to. But they were still ahead of me, unbothered. Lily's pale face turned toward me, and for a second, I thought I saw something wrong. Her eyes were darker now, not the innocent blue they had been when I first met her. It was like the light had faded from them, replaced with something older, something colder. And Lyle, he didn't speak, but his smile was wide, stretching almost too far, a grin that shouldn't have belonged to a child. I called out to them, but my voice felt thin, lost in the vast, choking air around us. Lily! Lyle! They didn't respond. They didn't even flinch. The sound of the knocking echoed in my head, pounding against my skull. The Watcher. It wasn't just a thing in the house anymore. It was here, too. I could feel it, the weight of its presence pressing down on me, suffocating me with every breath. It was the Watcher's power that had come alive, that had caused the house to shift, to twist into something monstrous. And if I stayed, if I let it, it would have me next. I pushed harder, my body screaming with the effort. The swamp water rose, slipping over my ankles, my knees, the weight of it holding me back. And then the sound, something deep, guttural, a growl that felt like it came from the earth itself. I turned, half expecting to see Carlos, his twisted, inhuman face grinning out of the fog. But it wasn't him. The land around me began to move. The trees were bending, warping, as though they were reaching for me. The branches snapped like bones. Something stirred in the dark water, sending ripples across the surface. I didn't dare look to see what it was. I reached for the twins, my hand outstretched. "We have to go, now!" I screamed, my voice breaking. But they didn't move. They just stood there, their eyes locked on me, and I realized they weren't even breathing. I reached them, grabbed Lily by the arm, but her skin was cold, unnaturally cold, and her grip was like iron, not the fragile hold of a child. "Lily?" I whispered, panic clawing at my throat. What are you?" Her lips parted, and the sound that came out of her mouth was not her voice. It wasn't even human. It was a low, rasping whisper, a language I didn't recognize, a language that made my skin crawl. The words weren't meant for me. They were meant for something else. Something that waited in the deep, in the shadows of the swamp, in the heart of the house. The ground trembled beneath me, and the water around my legs surged, pulling me down. I stumbled, my grip on Lily slipping. But she didn't fall. Instead, she stepped backward into the water, her feet sinking slowly into the muck. Lyle mirrored her, his tiny hands raised to the sky, as if beckoning something. And then it came. A shape, long and twisted, breaking the surface of the water. I couldn't see it fully. It was a blur, a shifting mass of shadows and limbs, something far too large to be real. It rose slowly, impossibly, its form elongating like a nightmare made flesh. The air went cold. My breath caught in my throat. The Watcher. I didn't have time to think. I couldn't. I only had enough time to run. To turn and sprint through the muck, not caring that the water was up to my waist now, that my legs were growing weaker with every step. The house behind me loomed like a waking nightmare, the windows now wide and dark, its shadow stretching toward me, pulling me back. The twins were gone, vanished into the swamp, swallowed by the Watcher's reach. They were no longer children, they were part of it, a tool in its ancient game. But I didn't stop. I pushed forward, breath ragged, lungs burning. My body was screaming. The land was fighting against me, clawing at my feet. The trees seemed to bend in, the shadows closing in like a cage. But I wouldn't stop. I couldn't stop. I had to escape. And then suddenly the ground gave way. I was falling, sinking into the blackness, the water swallowing me whole. The last thing I heard was the sound of my name, whispered by a voice that wasn't my own, carried on the wind. Carl, you can't run from what's inside. Then darkness. I woke up in a cold, sterile room. The walls were white, too bright, almost glaring. I could hear the faint hum of machines, the soft beep of a heart monitor that made my chest tighten every time it sounded. My head ached like 1,000 needles were stuck in it, pulsing with each throb. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the silence. There was no mist, no fog, no heavy air pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. There was no house, no twins, no Carlos. Just this empty room, and the faint, stale scent of hospital disinfectant. I blinked a few times, trying to focus on the white ceiling above me. I tried to sit up, but my limbs felt heavy, uncoordinated. I groaned and fell back into the bed, trying to gather my thoughts. What happened? How had I ended up here? The last thing I remembered was running through that damn swamp. The twins had been with me. I saw them, their pale faces, staring up at me like they knew the end was coming. The house had burned behind us, flames licking the sky, and I jumped into the water. The water, yes. The swamp had swallowed me up, and then nothing. I reached for my phone. It wasn't in my pocket. I tried the other one, the one I always kept with me. Empty. I felt my stomach twist. I looked around the room. There was a table next to me with some food trays and 4 bags, but no sign of my stuff. A nurse walked in then, her shoes clicking softly on the floor. She was older than I expected, with gray streaks in her brown hair. She didn't look at me at first, just adjusted the machines and checked the charts on the wall. When she finally turned her gaze toward me, it was calm, neutral, almost detached. "You're awake," she said, her voice flat, but with a touch of relief. I didn't know what to say. My throat was dry, my thoughts still jumbled. I cleared my throat and asked the first thing that came to mind. Where am I?" "You're in the local hospital," she replied, adjusting a drip in the 4. Elysian Grove Memorial. "You were brought in 3 days ago, after being found near the bayou." I swallowed, trying to absorb the information. 3 days. That's how long I'd been out. I looked down at my hands, trying to steady my racing heart. My mind was still back in that house, the dark rooms, the whispering twins, the unrelenting rules. Was anyone else with me? I asked. Her eyes flickered for a moment, and she hesitated before answering. "No, you were alone when we found you. You seemed confused and disoriented. Alone." Something gnawed at me. The twins. I had to make sure they were okay. I needed to know if they had gotten out, if they were safe. But I couldn't remember much about what happened after the fire. After I'd jumped into the water. Suddenly, I was hit with a cold wave of dread, and I leaned up in the bed, searching around the room. I had to make sure. I had to know. "Is there any sign of a family?" I asked, my voice tightening with panic. "The Morris family, the twins, Lily and Lyle, did they?" The nurse's face shifted, just slightly, before she answered. She looked at me, her expression now unreadable. "There's no record of anyone named Morris coming in here. There's no mention of twins either," she said, her words crisp and clinical, but there was something in the way she said it, something that didn't sit right with me. My heart pounded in my chest. I stared at her, unable to speak for a moment. That wasn't possible. They had been real. I'd seen them, heard them. I needed to get out of this room. I needed to get out of here. I swung my legs off the bed, the sheets rustling beneath me. The nurse moved quickly to stop me, her hand pressing gently on my shoulder. "You need to rest," she said, but there was a strange tension in her voice, almost like she was warning me, without saying anything. "I need my things," I said, trying to stand, my legs shaky beneath me. "My phone, my bag." She frowned but didn't protest. "I'll send someone to get your belongings," she said, her tone a little too reassuring. I didn't trust it. There was something wrong, something I couldn't quite place. The nurse left the room, her footsteps fading down the hall. I didn't wait for her to come back. My mind was already racing, my body moving before I could fully think it through. I grabbed the 4 drip out of my arm, feeling a sharp tug as the needle came free, and stumbled out of the bed. My head spun for a second, and I gripped the edge of the wall for support. The hallway was eerily quiet. I moved down it, peering around corners, trying to figure out what was going on. Every room I passed felt empty, silent. There was no sound. No bustle of nurses, no patients talking. It was as if the whole place had been abandoned. I reached the elevators, and as the doors slid open, I stepped inside. I punched the ground floor button, but before the doors could close, I froze. There, on the floor of the elevator, was a crumpled sheet of paper. I bent down, my fingers trembling as I picked it up. It was folded neatly, just like the list the Morris parents had handed me. The list of rules. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands shook violently as I unfolded the paper. It was the same list. The same rules. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. This wasn't possible. This wasn't happening. The elevator dinged and the doors slid shut, but the air inside felt suffocating. The knocking began then, soft, faint at first, but unmistakable. I knew it all too well. 3:33 a.m. I pressed my back against the wall, my heart pounding. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. The knocking grew louder. The elevator started to shake. I wasn't alone anymore. The watcher was here, and it had been waiting. I had convinced myself it was over. I should have known better. You don't escape a house like that. You don't leave the swamp and forget the things that followed you out. But I tried. I tried so hard to pretend that what happened in Elysian Grove was just a nightmare, something my mind had cooked up in the hours after I woke up in that sterile hospital room. But it's still here. It's still here. I hadn't thought about the list in weeks. It had been buried under old receipts, a fast food wrapper, and random scraps of paper in my bag. I hadn't even wanted to look at it. Not after everything. But today, just today, I found it. It was in the bottom of my bag, wedged between a crumpled t-shirt and an unopened letter from my mother. The paper was folded, its corners torn. It looked just like it had before, when I'd first laid eyes on it in that too-quiet house. The rules, written in a messy hand, looked so simple. So harmless. But then, I'd broken them. I'd ignored them, and now I know better. I stood in my apartment's hallway, the faint yellow light from the kitchen spilling out into the darkness. It was too quiet. I'd been lying on the couch, trying to pass the time with a book, but I kept hearing noises. The walls creaked. The air seemed to shift. The silence felt like it was pressing in on me. A sound came from somewhere down the hall, just a soft tap at first, like a small knock. I thought it was the pipes. Then it happened again. And again. Each knock was more insistent, louder. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. I told myself it was nothing, just the house settling. But I knew it wasn't. I had heard that sound before. Too many times. It was 3:33 a.m. I checked the clock, even though I already knew what it would say. Time didn't lie. It was mocking me. The knocking continued, slow but deliberate, like something was waiting for me to open the door. A chill crawled up my spine. It was the same knocking I'd heard in that house. That house that had changed me. That house that had swallowed up everything I'd been before. I could feel my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. My thoughts raced. I thought about running, leaving this apartment and disappearing into the night. But I knew it wouldn't matter. It would follow me just like it had before. Just like it had always followed the ones who failed. I stood there, frozen, with my hand on the door. Every part of me screamed to turn away, to block it out. But I couldn't. Something inside me was pulling me toward it, pushing me to face whatever was knocking at my door. I had to know. I had to open it. With a deep breath, I turned the handle. But the door didn't open. It didn't budge. It was as if something on the other side was holding it closed. I pushed harder, my chest tightening, but it was no use. I turned the knob again, this time with all my strength. The door creaked open, just a fraction. The hallway beyond was empty. No one there. No one could be there. Yet, the knocking kept coming, now more frantic. It was coming from inside. Inside my own apartment. I stepped back. My legs felt weak. I should have been running. I should have been doing anything but standing there in that damn hallway, waiting for something to burst from the shadows. And then I saw it. In the reflection of the mirror on the wall, I saw him. He was standing behind me. His face was pale, too pale, and his eyes were black, like there was nothing behind them. Just darkness. He didn't move. He didn't need to. I wasn't surprised. I should have been, but after everything I'd seen, after what I'd been through, I couldn't be shocked anymore. I turned to face him, my throat dry. But I couldn't finish. The words caught in my throat. He wasn't real, I told myself. This was just another hallucination. This was not the Watcher. Not him. But I knew better now. I knew I wasn't free. I would never be free. He stepped closer. The knocking stopped, and then the silence was louder than anything I'd ever heard. It felt like the walls were pressing in, like they were waiting for something, waiting for me to break again. I turned back to the door. The list was still in my hand. The paper was warm now, as if it had been burning in my grip. The last rule, the one I hadn't paid attention to, the one I hadn't realized was meant for me all along, was written in bold, uneven letters. If you read this, it's already too late. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, the room had changed. The hallway stretched longer, the walls closing in on me. The knocking had started again, louder this time. Closer. And then I heard it, soft but unmistakable. 3 taps, followed by a voice, whispering from the shadows. "Let me in." I stepped backward, and the knocking came again.